evolution from a biological point of view doesn't care very much for whether we're happy or not, whether we feel contented, whether we feel satisfied. All it's kind of concerned with is our survival. So you're welcome to another Dharma Night talk, and tonight I'm going to talk about cultivating metta. So this is the fourth week of a series that we've been exploring this thing called metta, which means basically, it's a very hard to translate word in a way. It sort of means positive intention, perhaps something like love, kindness, friendship, like a feeling or an emotion or an intention towards ourselves and others, to wish them well, a sort of well-wishing. And in the previous weeks we've also been talking about what conditions support that and how that can lead to a kind of experience of insight itself. But this week we really get down to the heart of it, if you like. We're talking about, tonight I'm going to talk about cultivating that metta. And some of you will probably be familiar with a practice called the Metta Bhavana, which literally translates as the cultivation of metta. That's a practice that is very common in the Buddhist world, in Buddhist practice. And it has a number of slightly different forms, but basically it's all about cultivating that sense of goodwill for ourselves and for others. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about some perhaps misconceptions or clarifications about cultivation of the metta, if you see what I mean. I guess it's also worth just restating the kind of goal in a way. One of the things we've been using to inspire us in the course of this series is a Buddhist text or a Buddhist scripture called the Karyana Metta Sutta. And in that there's a particular a line or two which says we should aspire to cultivate an unlimited heart for all beings, an unlimited heart for all beings. So in a sense, what we're trying to do in the Metta Bhavana practice, or even just in our kind of day-to-day lives in a way, as a Buddhist practitioner or as somebody who's interested in cultivating metta, is we're trying to basically expand our goodwill towards more and more people, if you see what I mean, until ultimately, hopefully, we can get to a point of having this unlimited heart for all beings, as big as that sounds. But I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe clarify a few things around the cultivation of metta, and specifically the Metta Bhavana practice in this week. So quite often commonly the practice is done in 5 stages, and it's usually you start with yourself, and then you have a friend, and then you have a stranger, and then you have what's traditionally called the enemy, or somebody that's caused you harm or hurt, and then you expand that out to all beings. And the idea is that you wish these people well, you bring them to mind, you wish them well, and you gradually expand out. And obviously it's, we all have a degree of, self-interest, we all have a degree of self-interest. So I know some people find it difficult to kind of care for themselves or love themselves even, but at the very least, everyone should have a sense of kind of, looking after yourself. You feed yourself, you take yourself to bed, you buy yourself clothes, etc. So, we start with the self because that's the point. That's the point that's kind of closest in a way, closest into us. And from once we can care for ourselves, love ourselves, we can broaden out to more and more people. But in the traditional version of the practice, as well as bringing people to mind, and as well as bringing yourself to mind and bringing these other people to mind, there's also these phrases that you can use. So sometimes, while you're in that process of sort of imagining the person, there's also common phrases, which you may want to you can say to yourself to try and help you generate a bit more of that feeling towards them. And those phrases are often, may they be happy, may they be well, may they be free from suffering, and may they make progress. So some people find those helpful and some people don't. But I just wanted to kind of tease out a couple of points in them because it's quite useful or relevant for our understanding of metta. And actually quite, in a way, for this week, I've been inspired by the sort of questions that people ask me while I'm teaching them the Metta Bhavana practice. And I just want to talk a little bit about happiness. So, we want to, ideally we're wishing people happiness. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that in a way, because people can, people can think all sorts of things make them happy in a way, like having a nice new car, or plenty of money and a nice job and so on, or a beautiful partner, or whatever it is in a way. But what we're specifically talking about in the Metta Bhavana practice is a kind of spiritual happiness, or an internal happiness. So I guess what we're aspiring to as Buddhist practitioners is to live in a place, or live in a state where we are happy regardless of our external circumstances, if you see what I mean. So we've got a sense of contentment, a sense of ease about our life, even if the external conditions around us aren't giving us what we want in a way. So, we've probably all had the experience of, there's quite a lot of loss around at the moment, isn't there? There's people falling ill, and maybe, relatives of yours have been unwell, or maybe your life situations are a bit difficult at the moment. Maybe you're a bit lonely at home during lockdown, or whatever it is, But if we are looking for our external conditions for happiness, then the trouble is those conditions are never reliable. They're never reliable enough, like I guess we never thought a global pandemic was going to happen and we'd find ourselves in this situation. We probably all had quite active social lives to keep us happy, or maybe you've had some big changes to your life during this period. Maybe something has shifted in your relationships. There's quite a lot of tension around at the moment if you live with your partners or your children, and maybe things have changed with your job. So all of those things, if we place our happiness on them, can make us, if something changes, can make us unhappy. So what we're trying to do in the Metta Bhavana here is kind of wish a happiness which isn't conditional on those things, a kind of contentment. And that applies to ourselves, of course, as well as, or even before we start wishing that happiness onto other people. So we're trying to, wish people a kind of contentedness, a happiness. And if you may think that, your life is you're quite a happy person in a way. You've got everything you need. But, what if, say, one day, you're in your house there's the heating breaks and suddenly there's no heat, and maybe you can't get food or something, and in very difficult situations it's so easy, isn't it, to kind of fall back into a kind of a despair or an unhappiness in a way. But I guess at the ultimate level, a really good practice of metta would be one which the person can remain happy and stable regardless of any circumstance. The other slight thing I wanted to pick up on is this phrase about progress. May they make progress, or may I make progress. And, in our in our sort of westernized society, progress can so often mean a kind of just a sort of a material progress. We can think about perhaps our progress at work, or gathering up qualifications or skills or experiences, or getting like a sense of getting on with life in a way. But what we're wishing here in the Metta Bhavana practice is a kind of, if you like, is a growth or a spiritual progress, or an openness, if you prefer that sort of metaphor. A sense that that person is developing in a kind of spiritual way. And this is quite interesting when you get to, in the Metta Bhavana practice, sort of thinking about what was called the enemy, or the difficult person, somebody that's caused you harm. It may be that person has very different views to yourself. And, what we're doing when we're wishing them well is not necessarily accepting their views, accepting their sort of, in a certain way, aspirations for the world. It might be that one of the reasons that you're having difficulties with them is because they have a very different kind of, they have different values to you, for instance, in a certain way, and there's some sort of clashing happening. But what we're doing here is wishing them progress, is kind of wishing them, in a certain way, so they could grow beyond their faults, in a way, their faults and flaws, that may be some of the reason that you and them are having difficulties. So we're asking for a sort of progress, and that also goes for ourselves as well. You know, we're wishing ourselves a spiritual progress, not just a kind of I hope I get that promotion, or I hope I get good exam results, or I hope that goes well, or I hope this goes well. What we're really wishing ourselves is, may I see beyond my current limitations. May I go beyond them. May I grow and deepen and become a more spiritually developed individual. So that's what we're talking about in terms of progress. I'll just check my time here. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is just this sense of developing the metta, developing the kindness. So we so often operate out of a kind of tightness. In a certain way, it's completely natural. So, you know, in the kind of, we've evolved in a way to be protective of ourselves, of our kind of resources, of the things that we want around us, protective of our families, protective of our little groupings or our clans or our villages. We've sort of evolved to be protective of these groups of people that are close to us and ourselves as well. So in a certain way, if somebody threatens that, if somebody effectively gets in the way of us securing what we think we need to live, then it's so easy for us to kind of default into a kind of an ill will or a resentment, or a kind of even a hatred if it continues to be present over time. It can evolve into a hatred, and that's where we get to the point whereby people, you know, different factions can get polarized, and they kind of attack each other or kill each other or whatever. This sort of sense of ill will and protectiveness, self-protectiveness, protectiveness of our family, of our groupings, and so on. So in a certain way, that's quite natural. It's almost like a biological imperative. And what we're doing in the Metta Bhavana practice is sort of trying to train ourselves out of that kind of natural instinctual habit of self-protection. And of course, it's not easy. It's not easy, you know, because we're going against something which is kind of, hardwired, as I've said, but also something which isn't very helpful to us. You know, our kind of like evolution from a biological point of view doesn't care very much for whether we're happy or not, whether we feel contented, whether we feel satisfied. All it's kind of concerned with is our survival. So we've sort of brought that with us. You know, it's a bit of an out-of-date kind of model for our society now, this kind of desire for survival at all costs. And we're trying to, you know, our consciousness is evolved to such a point where we care more about how we are, how our experience, the experience of others around us, altruistic behaviours, social behaviours. So Metta is very much working against that natural tendency to default towards the negative and to the protected. So it's not easy. But the Metta Bhavana practice helps us to try to work on that piece by piece. Yeah, so you don't necessarily expect to find lots happening in any one practice. In a certain way, we overcomplicate it a lot of the time. All we need to do is sit down and imagine somebody and try to wish them well to the best of our ability.
Well, thank you, Birinaga. I really enjoyed listening to that. There's just so much you can say about the Metta Bhavana. It has so many different dimensions, and I think that's such a significant point you made about what happiness means. You know, when we're wishing people to be happy, there's such a broad range of interpretation as to what that is. And it also brings in contentment, doesn't it? You know, I think that the type of happiness you're talking about, it comes from it within. Is a type of contentment, which really is a very high spiritual quality when you think about it.
I mean, it seems like some people can struggle a bit with the Metta Bhavana practice.
Yes.
I wonder if that's because they don't have quite enough imagination around what it is.
Yes.
In a way, like I've also struggled with it quite a lot in a way.
Yeah.
And I think just in a certain way, just wishing people were happy isn't enough for me in a way. Not enough for me to kind of get enough of a kind of grasp of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean happiness in a kind of mundane sense. You know.
Yes, if you understand what the happiness that you're wishing for, and it's also, I think, what can be very confusing about the Metta Bhavana is the way we bring in that word love or warmth, friendliness, and we're expecting to have a certain kind of feeling overnight, you know, that all of a sudden we turn a switch. And it's more about intention, and that what we turn our minds to, we become. So it's having faith that, you know, even if it just feels like we're repeating words, but if we listen to them, it will have an effect. Of course, we need to connect with our emotions. I mean, that's why we have people in our lives in each stage, because ultimately Metta is beyond the personal, but we need to engage our emotions. But this whole, I think people think it's not enough just to say words or the intention, and not seeing the fact that we put negative words in our mind all the time that are having an effect.
I sort of like that point, because it, you know, another thing that I sort of struggled with in the Metta Bhavana was I was wondering whether it should be something more should have been going on in a way. I was sitting down to do the Metta Bhavana practice, and it wasn't feeling like it was going anywhere, so I sort of feel a bit frustrated about it. But of course, what I know now after practicing the Metta Bhavana for some years in a way is that actually it doesn't actually matter what it feels like in the meditation in a way. It has an effect. Yes. You know, it just sort of you just do the Metta Bhavana, and like you're saying, you have a faith. Yeah. And it just does something. Yeah. You know, it does kind of work.
Just sitting down and having the intention has an effect. And what's fascinating in our teacher's Sangharakshita's exploration about this teaching of the Buddhas, you know, the Buddha brings in let no one deceive another, despise any person, wish harm, out of anger or ill will. You talked about that. But Sangharakshita brings in the philosopher Spinoza, saying that a lot of thought goes into hatred. We think it's an emotion, but what hatred is we experience pain, and then we think out there who's to blame for it. And it happens over a period of time. We bring in memory, and before we know it, you know, we built up this hatred. So thought is very significant in building up hatred. So thought could be very significant in building up loving kindness. I think, you know, it's a quid pro quo.
I mean, you only have to look at some social media sites, don't you, or look at the polarisation around politics or whatever to see an expression of that ill will in a way. And imagine if all of that energy had gone into the opposite instead. You know, cultivating metta and cultivating love, you know.
I mean, it's the power of words, isn't it? That's, you know, the words can be so potent, as we're seeing on social media, and the effect it's having in terms of stoking up anger and hatred. And Sangharakshita also brings in this point that, you know, anger, well, it's not great, but it's a flash. Whereas if it's not experienced and turned into, it could go underground, and then you build up resentment, and then there are worse things like malice, you know, actually wishing harm on someone, which is the exact antithesis of the Metta Bhavana.
And that's another good thing about the Metta Bhavana, isn't it? It lets you know what's really going on.
Yes.
I've had people ask me, like, I've taught them the Metta Bhavana, and they've said, oh, I realised, I brought my friend in and realised actually I had ill will towards them.
Yes.
You know, you sort of like, you can sort of fool yourself to think that you feel one way about somebody, where actually what's really going on is something a bit different. Yes. You know, and maybe I'll just make another point, which I'm sure you'll agree with me, that in the Metta Bhavana practice, we're not skating over any emotion that's there. No. You know, we really have to start with where we're at.
That's right. That's right. It's about turning into those emotions and transforming them. It's not about blocking anything negative. It's turning into them, and there's energy in that, but we're just redirecting it.
And particularly important with the the enemy or the difficult person.
Yes.
I think, when I'm doing the practice, I really want to feel that kind of uncomfortableness when I first bring them to mind. That sort of, I know then I'm really in touch with my actual feeling.
Exactly.
I should feel a tightening up, and there's a bit of a like, oh, actually, and then it's about the practice is about working with that tightness rather than just kind of skating over it and trying to be a bit nicey.
Yeah. Do you bring metta to that tense? Because you're suffering, aren't you? When you're tensing up, when you're thinking of someone you find difficult.
Yeah. Well, it's a good reminder, because I can, even if I'm a bit out of touch with my emotions, that body tension is a good clue.
Yes.
And I can just sort of like, okay, relax the body and what's going on, feel the emotion, and then I can, the Mettā Bhavana, although we talk about the metta as a feeling, it's in a certain way, quite a rational practice, isn't it?
Yes.
You can kind of work your way through, okay, what is it about that person that I'm upset with? Why do I feel that? Why have I reacted that way? What are they bringing to it? You can just sort of work through things in a kind of meditative way, and hopefully, open them up so you can feel a bit more. Not this, basically.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great way of working. But also you can just open it out to beyond the person, because metta is beyond the personal. It's they're a human being. And there's a solidarity with that person, and like us, they just want to be happy and avoid suffering. And when we really think about it, when I have somebody in the fourth stage, I don't really want them, even though they annoy me or they've hurt me, I don't really want harm to come to them. What's the outcome if I keep to this? What am I really saying about this person? And I listen to those words.
Like you're saying, it creates a pattern, doesn't it, that can perpetuate.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, maybe just to pick up on that point there in a way, there was a sort of other point that I was quite interested in, which is around, it sounds like you've got a slightly different approach to the Mettā Bhavana to me in a way. And I think in a certain way that's one of the beauties of the practice, isn't it? You can be very creative with it, although it's quite a structured practice, actually. The way into it is almost as unique as the individual.
Yes.
So I wondered if you could say a bit about that in a way, or whether you had any comments on different ways of working in metta, or things that have worked with you in the past, or your way of working with the Mettā Bhavana now.
Well, for one thing, I just wanted to go back to the previous point. It's like a mirror, metta, and you put someone you think you have really warm feelings for in the second stage, all of a sudden you find, there's all this resentment. And I personally work a bit like you in that I notice my responses. It's about my responses in each stage, and what's needing attention, that's unhappy about that person, what's creating this distance between me and this person. And often it's coming back to home base, to metta for myself. And I think it is a rational emotion. I think if we were really in line with the reality, the way it was, we'd be feeling metta all the time, because there's no, like animals don't feel animosity. They struggle for survival, and they might fight, but they don't bear grudges. They don't have this human tendency to do that, which, really, if you remove the source of harm, why do you need to carry on having resentment, for example, like an animal would? So there is that rational point, but there's also, I used to treat it very psychologically, my relationship with that person, and I do see it's much bigger, it's beyond the person. So I try to get into our common humanity. What would be, do I really wish them harm, for example, which is the opposite of metta. So where am I in that spectrum? And and getting to, I remember one person I was really stuck with. It was trying so hard. It's a number of years ago. And then all of a sudden it hit me, she's going to die. I'm going to die. She's going to die. And just immediately went, because I just saw a common human situation. What does it matter, So, I mean, those are a few ways, but I think it's more about that mirror to the response. It's not so much about them and wanting to change them.
Yes, yeah, that's
it's
right.
about my response.
Yeah, very important point there, isn't it? It's about our response to them and not the other way around in a way.
That's right, if only they would change. You know?
Yeah. Not wanting things to all be okay, but us owning our own responses.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's a good point. Well, we better wrap up.
Sure.
There's some good points there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Viranaga.
Yeah. And I just wanted to let people know that if you want to learn the Metta Bhavana practice, you can find more videos on how to do that on our YouTube channel. So and also led meditations as well. So if you want a more fine-grained going through of the actual practice, you can find those online.
And also, again, recommend this wonderful book, Living with Kindness, which we're following on this course. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma Night talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, and you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.